For over 3,300 years, the Torah has been a living document, a guidebook for people of all ages, from ancient times to the modern age.
They tell the story about a man and a woman on a dinner date together. For over 2 hours, the gentleman is talking all about his hobbies, his accomplishments, his travels around the world, and his wonderful, humble personality. Finally, he looks up at the young lady and he says, "Okay, enough of me talking about me. I'd like to know, what do you think about me?" In our Torah portion this week, the Jewish people are on the cusp of redemption. They are set to leave Egypt and journey into the desert, with the land of Israel, the promised land, their final destination. Before they leave, God appears to Moses and Aaron to give the Jewish people this new nation, their first directive, their first mitzvah, the first commandment. What would you think that mitzvah would be? What fundamental precept would God communicate to his people that will serve as the guiding principle for this chosen nation? What type of core values should serve as the bedrock of a moral society and should therefore be reflected in the very first mitzvah? In Exodus chapter 12, God tells Moses and Aaron to establish a lunar calendar. This is the first commandment. The Jews will no longer use the solar calendar as the Egyptians did, but will now count time based on the moon's 29.5-day cycle. God shows Moses a vision of the moon's silver crescent and tells him that the Jewish month shall now be determined based on the appearance of this new moon. It's quite unexpected that God would choose this mitzvah, important as it is, as the first to command to his people. One would expect that there would be a more fundamental law, perhaps the belief in God, the rejection of idol worship, the commandment to love one's fellow man, or the like, that would truly be representative of the morals and ethics that will allow this people to build a relationship with God and serve as a light unto the nations. Changing their calendar was more than just a public service announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to leave Egypt and enter into a new time zone. Please set your watches to Jewish time. Jewish mysticism tells us that this calendar shift was meant to signal a major shift in the spiritual orientation of the Jewish people. As they were set to experience liberation from a spiritual bondage, this reorientation would prepare them for the divine legacy that they were going to receive at Mount Sinai just 7 weeks later. The commandment to adopt a new way of counting time was meant to teach them to adopt a new way of thinking, a new way of living, a new philosophy of life. The Egyptians worshipped the sun as a deity. A central objective of the ancient Egyptian culture was material prosperity and power. The sun represented the beneficence of nature, as it provided heat and light and promoted agricultural growth. The Egyptians developed many rituals which they believed would make the sun gods happy and ensure an uninterrupted flow of material blessings. Their relationship with the sun was, perhaps, like a child's view of an ATM machine. You push the right buttons, and out comes the cash. We see the same philosophy in their worship of other gods. They deified the Nile River as it irrigated their crops. They consulted stargazers as they believed the constellations influenced their fate. And they also deified the lamb and the zodiac sign of Aries, as the docile and subdued animal was the perfect example of trouble-free material abundance. The Egyptians looked at everything for its subsidiary benefits. In a sentence, what's in it for me? The moon represents a philosophy that completely and utterly symbolizes the exact opposite. The moon represents a relationship that does not seek the sun's light for its own benefit, but only to reflect that light to a world that sits in darkness. By commanding the Jewish people to reorient the way they kept time, the Torah establishes a fundamental principle of what life is all about and what lies at the heart of our very purpose. God wanted to remove the notion of a self-centered existence. God sought to wean the Jewish people from expecting a relationship based on material returns and instead to value the connection, the relationship itself. At the dawn of the Exodus, God taught the Jewish people to reject the selfish worship of the sun and instead to embrace the selfless characteristics of the moon. In this week's Torah portion, we learn to view our material resources not as an end to itself, but as a means to an end, as a means to serve God and bring perfection to all of creation. I'm Rabbi Benny Rappaport, and thank you for joining us.